the pages and pages in the Telegraph.
Jaw-dropping.
The leaked WhatsApp messages. And it's quite surprising, isn't it, to write a book with a co-author, Isabel Oakeshott, a well-known journalist, and then for her to suddenly decide to reveal in the Telegraph all the things you chose not to put in the book,
the diaries.
all that the Cabinet Office took out of the book.
Yeah. But also, in the first place, Ed, it's very odd that somebody writes a diary of the pandemic, but they don't write the diary. They employ a journalist. They get a journalist to write it for them. Why? What, did he not keep a detailed diary at the time? I mean, why did he need a journalist to write it for him in the first place?
That book should be in the fiction section of any shop. And if I was Isabel Oakeshott, I'd ask for my name to be taken off it, because, of course, it was written as an authorised version to make Matt Hancock good. I don't think anybody's going to be laughing at him next time he goes into the audience of Dancing on Ice, or when he's on a Celebrity SAS or whatever that's called, or whenever he's cavorting. Now you can see all these messages. Now, he claims he's been misrepresented,
of course he
but
does.
you can see he is overruling the advice of Chris Whitty, England's chief medical officer.
And the whole point is
testing it's really hard. So this, I know, my mum was in a care home at the time. This is so personal, and so emotional for people who lost loved ones in these
20,000 died in care homes in the first wave, 43,000 overall.
And the focus was on the NHS moving people, sometimes with COVID, into care homes. The issue here, though, is people going from the community into care homes. And what is really hard to work out from all the coverage, on the 14th of April 2020, in the morning, Matt Hancock WhatsApps that Chris Whitty is advising testing of everybody going to care homes. And then it then says later in the day, Alan Nixon, Hancock's special advisor, says, I wasn't in the testing meeting, just to check. Officials are saying your steer is to remove the commitment to testing on admissions to care homes from the community, but keep the commitment from hospital. Is that right? And Hancock says, fine, tell me if I'm wrong. I'd rather leave it out and just commit to testing all going into care from hospital. I don't think the community commitment adds anything and it muddies the waters. What happened in the morning from Hancock saying Whitty wants to test all to the afternoon, him changing his mind? And I would say he has to come out today and answer that, because that is like the gaping hole in this.
Is it just that he thinks he knew better? Because if you remember, we were told again and again, we're following the science. And here's Chris Whitty, the Chief Scientific Officer, saying everyone going into care homes. We said at the time, COVID getting into care, it was a terrible analogy, like a fox getting into a chicken coop, the most vulnerable people, and here was advice which he appears to have rejected and ignored.
Remember, Hancock said he put a protective arm around care homes. No, he didn't.
Protective ring?
Yeah. Sorry, it was a ring. It was a ring, sorry. But people were discharged from hospital into care homes with COVID. They weren't tested. Then they bring in testing for people from hospitals. But he's against the community testing, as you say. He subsequently blames staff for taking care.
He did.
Care homes, COVID. Yeah,
he said that in the jungle.
Well, if you're not going to have community testing, they're not going to be tested, are they? So he's got to have responsibility and answer the questions.
You mentioned the date. Go to the diaries. Wednesday, the 15th of April, is obviously the relevant day. From today, everyone going from hospital into social care will be tested and then isolated while the result comes through. Good. Now there is more capacity. The NHS and CQC are also increasing testing for care home staff and residents amid reports of rising deaths, though we are struggling to get precise figures. So, I mean, talk about muddying the waters.
Yeah, and no mention of the people going in from the community into care homes.
And no mention of the advice that he got recommending.
It's not mentioned at all. And remember, we were told they were following the scientific advice.
That book was to show him as a superhero, the person who was doing the right thing against everybody else. Well, it doesn't quite look like that now. Now, I accept that Isabel Oakeshott is now lockdown sceptic, and the Telegraph increasingly is lockdown sceptic, and questions have to be asked about breaking the agreement. However, I personally think it's a public service that all this is in the public domain, and we can begin to make up our own minds and see.
Would this have been in the public inquiry, these WhatsApp messages? I mean, would they have been? I don't know. WhatsApps are encrypted, so
No,
Would we
but
have
they're on
seen
your
them?
phone.
Yeah.
You can, you know,
Hancock.
presumably it's a work phone, and therefore you have to hand that over as
Hancock-
part
As
of
we
an
know
inquiry.
from the, from recent WAG trials,
Yeah.
the issue arises about
Yeah.
do you have to release
Yes.
into a legal process the WhatsApp messages, and and sometimes phones disappeared. Or,
I think you'd have to into a judicial inquiry.
Well, he's
'cause
not-
this
I
will
think
be a
you would.
judicial
I
inquiry.
think you would, unless they disappeared or you.
Yeah.
But these
fell in the
haven't
water.
disappeared.
Yeah, as well as
Fell off a boat.
They're right
That's
here.
kind of-
the phone's not been dropped off
A boat.
ferry,
Wasn't it a boat?
and there hasn't been some technical
the
malfunction
thing is-
as they transfer. But Hancock's people said they'd provided all relevant material. Now, I've no doubt the inquiry will be cross-checking everything he's given them with this cash. But I do know, I've seen other public inquiries, and you get a lot of embarrassing stuff in WhatsApp messages when they're all handed over. But this...
Fair play to the
big
Telegraph,
question-
but it's not really. I mean, there ought to be a proper independent judicial inquiry now, and it should happen quickly.
Well, it starts, doesn't it start in April?
Yeah, but it'll go on for ages. In fact,
Yeah, that's gotta go on for years.
the Telegraph addressed that, saying it will go on for so long. We're doing this
Well,
now.
And you see,
Get
they're
it
calling it the
immediately.
lockdown fast, and it's done by their lockdown team.
Yes. Well, she made.
Well,
I mean,
think there's days of this to come.
there is.
Isabel